Okay, time for a little side trip here. At first I was a little upset that I hadn't checked something and the net result was going to be a change in plan. And then I realized it was actually better that this came up because it affords an educational opportunity. I guess we'll word it that way. So we're going to take a little side trip here and discuss something that anybody who's into repair work needs to be aware of and deal with accordingly. Also, pipe makers need to know this. Okay, this pipe, you haven't seen this one before, but I brought it out as an example, a real world example of a problem that this pipe is barely smokable anymore. It's a Savinelli autograph of an unusual design, nice ring blast. You don't see many in bamboo, and you think, what in the world could be the problem here? I'll show you. This rod, same diameter as the Airway, goes in that far and stops hard. And it is that long. It goes down to right there, and then it takes a bend, meaning the Airway has an elbow in it starting roughly 1/4 of an inch below the bamboo here, and then it moves. It's about a 15-degree bend, and then it moves in, touches the bottom of the chamber down here. Well, okay, smoke can travel around corners, so what's the problem? It's that with years of smoking, regardless of how you clean them, and regardless of the tools and chemicals used, hard carbon will eventually not only form in the chamber, but it'll form in the Airway. In the first 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch, it'll crawl up the interior of the Airway, and it's as hard as stone almost. The net result is, from time to time on a well-smoked pipe, you must be able to get a drill bit down into it. Here's one that has the tip of it has been ground so it's got a kind of a bullet shape instead of a square shape. And from time to time you take pipes and you ream the shank out with an appropriate sized and shaped drill bit. It's the only way. Brushes won't do it, alcohol won't do it, nothing will do it. And in this particular case, the only option here, technically, I could do this, I just don't have the energy and the desire to deal with somebody else's causes here. Saw this off. Literally take a razor saw, cut this in half, ream it out, and glue it back together. And that's kind of ridiculous, it seems to me. And how this came to pass is that when the pipe was being made, the shank extension was made and drilled separately from the stummel portion, the briar part, and it was drilled, and then they were mated without any thought given to the Airway staying straight. And the end result now is I'm an owner with a pipe that can't be smoked without radical work, which is about the same as if you bought a new car and sometime down the road you found out that it needed new spark plugs and the dealership told you you have to remove the entire engine from the car, lay it on the ground, change the spark plugs, reinstall it in the car. That's going to be $4,800. That would not make you a happy man or woman. Well, this is the pipe making equivalent to that. So, I haven't seen very many examples of this over the years, but I've seen a few, and this one I actually own. Now, you wonder where all this is going. Here's our subject pipe, the Loma or Lama from Sweden. Well, I did not check when I saw that the hole was more or less centered, the air draft hole was more or less centered in the shank. I didn't think to check because I haven't seen this in a long time, but you see the angle there. Let's see if I can get this. This is a little, yeah, that's a bigger one. This now drops at about a 12 to 15 degree angle, and it's not square in the other 90 degrees out. It's not square there either. So what it means is my original assumption that this had been formed, that this pipe had been made with that thin tube of wood, was actually the shank that had been turned way down and then drilled and then turned. That is not true. Apparently the stack, the spacer, and the horn portion were assembled separately. The stummel was drilled, and then this was glued on, so that this pipe has exactly the same problem that this one does. Now, you're probably thinking, well, okay, you had to take it apart anyway because it broke, so no harm done. Well, yes and no, in that this means that it cannot be repaired using the stainless steel tubing that I hope to be able to use as both a reinforcement and a moisture barrier. All that we're going to be able to do, now that this is the case, is to take our piece of synthetic horn here and just butt glue it onto the face of the shank and call it good. Now, is that probably going to be enough? Yes. Should it be the case? Absolutely not. I don't think that people who make pipes, well, let me back up. I think the people who make pipes, some of them, rarely, but some of them, they will sketch out their design and then they'll back into engineering choices to accommodate the visual appearance of the pipe. That's how you get into these problems. They put the cart before the horse. The only proper way to make a pipe, in my mind, and it's not just because I'm a repairman, it's just the way I see the world in general, is you start with something that's structurally sound and logically designed, and then that must be accommodated by the visual portion. That if you turn those around, you're going to back yourself into a corner and end up with stuff like this. So we will now just do a flat join on this. It'll actually go that way. Now this has to be turned on a lathe to get that kind of trumpet shape out of it, and we'll just glue it on there. And this sleeve is made of Delrin. That goes in. It's going to be glued, and the stem will go in there. The fit on that will be adjusted for it. Once that's glued, then we can tune the fit. This, by the way, that sleeve was left about 1.5 thousandths loose to give plenty of room for glue in there. We want that to be able to really hold on tight, so I'm going to be grinding a lot of irregularities on the surface of this piece here so that we get a mechanical lock, a 3D puzzle piece style. And the gluing of this to the shank is going to be done as meticulously as it can be done using the finest materials I can obtain, but I will not be as happy with the final result as if stainless had been able to be used. Also, another not a shortcut exactly, but something I was sort of counting on that is not the case. The shank isn't round. I made the assumption that it had been turned on a lathe, and that's partially true. It was at some early stage, but it's actually quite irregular. It's kind of squarish with some lumps and stuff in it. So what that means is that just turning this artificial horn down to the same size and gluing them together isn't going to be enough. I'm going to have to get it close and then center it with some slop and then level it in the same way that you would level a stem on a taper stem on a billiard pipe or something like that. So there's more work, and that'll trigger a refinish of part of the shank, which is something I did not want to do because it's a contrast stain, and those can be a real bear to duplicate. Now, in case somebody's wondering, a question that was worth thinking about, I even entertained the idea. I turned a piece of briar into the same diameter as the Airway, thinking perhaps it's a good tight squeak fit, that to glue that in there would basically turn it back into a solid block, and then I could re-drill it and be able to use stainless steel. The problem is, in order to intersect the bottom of the chamber, then the Airway would have had to have been at the very top of the base of the mortise here. Would have had to have moved this up into that 15 degrees would have gone away, slammed this on the roof of this to go straight in, and the problem then would be you couldn't get a pipe cleaner in and out without having to do a dance with it each time. So it was one way or the other, it's going to get you. You're either going to have to play pipe cleaner games in the short term or deal with a lack of having the stainless steel in the long term. But there's no escaping the long-term net effects of someone having, either through laziness or a lack of concern, made this pipe the wrong way. So that's where we are. I'm going to go shape this. We'll get our components together, and I'll show you how we glue it together. And whatever is required after that, I don't know. The stem's in good shape. We'll tune the fit of the mortise, the tenon rather. Shine all this up just because that's what you do on old pipes. Get them as clean as you can. And see what we have when we get it all laid up. So there you go. Lecture mode off. That looks to be it for now. So see you in a bit.